Welcome back to Beer Thunder, and today we're doing a face-off, a head-to-head between the F4E Phantom 2 and the MiG-21 BIS, the two of the planes that exist in the game of War Thunder, because I'm here to show you how to one circle, to two circle, and to circle up some bitches, because this is one of those generic War Thunder dueling videos that I honestly, I watch some of the sim ones and they're so bad. They're so like garbage because usually it's two people who haven't the slightest like fucking clue going at it, and there's no semblance of like trajectories or anything. Like, they're hard to watch. Like, you want to watch like 1v1s that are painful. Just like queue up the Arrow Turtle channel. Like, watch any of the 1v1s. You just like, you'll die a little bit on the inside. And if you really want to die a little bit on the inside, let's play the Arrow Turtle drinking game. And it's really simple. You gotta queue up a video, you gotta watch a video, gotta get them some sloppy views. And there's a couple rules. There's gonna be a couple prerequisites here. Number one, you need some beer, and you probably need some hard liquor. Preferably hard liquor, because we want to die. Aside from that, there's 4 other steps. And step number 1 is, anytime the phrase one circle, two circle, or nose authority are mentioned, take a sip. Take a full shot. Anytime someone mentions rate fight and the F-16 in the same sentence. Take a shot for every time there's a transition from first-person view to flyby, just like a Growling Sidewinder video where like they zoom in on the missile and like, oh wow, the missile missed, because the video is like 10 minutes long. And then the last step, because you're probably already going to die of alcohol poisoning at this point, is just finish your drink anytime one or the other of them just like immediately reverses into guns. There you go. You have just died of alcohol poisoning. That is kind of the current state of like sim dogfighting videos. And the reason I don't do a lot of these, especially asymmetric matchups, is like there is stuff to learn from them. There is interesting things that can be said about them. It's also really, really easy to just throw a bunch of fucking terminology in it and value terminology over proficiency and create an audience that feels like they're informed and has just enough tools to spawn the most abysmal dog shit takes possible. That and the other thing is, like, most asymmetric matchups are actually not all that interesting. The MiG-21 BIS versus F4E matchup, in the good old days before they nerfed the MiG-21 flight model, I would say that it was pretty one-sided. After doing about an hour of this, probably around an hour and a half actually, and I'm cutting the replay to, because it's an hour. I'm not talking about fucking dogfights for an hour. Right now, first go at it seems pretty balanced, but that doesn't mean anything, because it's really easy for me to go put out like a 15-minute video and be like, oh, here's the first 5. I got my fucking ass beat by an F4E because I kept like doing things that were stupid and wrong, like, you know, flying in front of the guns. That's like a pretty good example in the background of like, I thought that I had the energy, and I thought I could go up and maybe stall him out and then like drop in on him and be like, oh yeah, cool, I did like specific excess power energy trap, yeah. I basically should be dead here. The fact that I'm not is literally just a fluke of like aim not being quite what it's supposed to be. And sim is a lot more forgiving in that respect than AirRB. But AirRB is also pretty forgiving, especially when you take two people with spastic autism and just like throw them against each other, and you also end up with bad takes. As far as it comes to like actually watching asymmetrical matchups, like I have a couple people that I'll actually watch and actually listen to their input because I know they're not actually fucking incompetent. Number one is probably like for AirRB stuff, Willy Walrus is good. Same thing for Defen, as long as they're limited to AirRB, and they can kind of like talk about AirSB too, because like the matchups don't change as much as people think there is. This idea that a plane is going to be dog shit in AirRB, but it's going to be great in sim, especially with like no battle rating changes, with no matchup changes, is kind of like it's a fucking War Thunder sim communityism that only proves to be true until the other guy gets thumbs. You're like, oh, never mind, the thing's actually fucking abysmal dog shit. So yeah, aside from sim, really, I kind of like, I test this stuff with people in my server, people that I have kind of like not really trained, I'd say taught. I don't want to elevate playing War Thunder to like call it trading. That's just dumb. But there are a couple of people that I have taught how to do some duels, and there's also people outside that, like Ace underscore Sungho or whatever. Like, if I really need to see if something's like brain dead easy to do and impossible to beat, like an impossible matchup, like yeah, I'll go fight him. Like F16A or F16C or F15A versus SU27. I got him in an SU27, and I was able to beat him. And when the skill gap is that big, it's like, yeah, this is a pretty like obvious outcome. And that outcome really hasn't changed that much. There are some things that you can do in Sim that are a little bit more forgiving than AirRB, like flying around the guns. You can basically be safe at a shorter distance because it is harder to aim, and there are things that you can do, especially with like the way that you angle the cockpit. Because in AirRB you got third person, in Sim you got first person, so you can't like really look at a guy that's like directly below your nose. It changes kind of the way you have to orient the plane. Aside from that, the way to actually learn all this bullshit is to actually like show the fuck up and do it, instead of like talking about it, instead of consuming 16 hours of videos. Like the best introduction to dueling videos are still the fucking like 10-year-old Zelator videos where dude's like yapping in Spanish going contraatacas, contraatacas, contraatacas. Like, because that's enough to start, and you really don't need a lot beyond that aside from practicing with other people. And the reason that there aren't good asymmetrical dueling videos is because the people that know how to do it, the people that could actually talk about it, also don't feel confident enough to talk about it, because we could all just fucking nitpick each other to death. I can look at these duels right here, and in some of these I'm like, I might be overusing my flaps in the MiG-21 bis. There is a thing with the MiG-21 bis where they have blown flaps, where some of the engine power, blah blah blah, is diverted from ducts or some bullshit over the flaps, which means it will produce more lift at low speeds, but you're still losing thrust. And there's a timing to it where if you're going vertical and you deploy like the landing flaps or the takeoff flaps, you might not go as far vertical as if you just like tucked them away and kept them in. And managing that timing might be the big difference here. The other thing here is, so I did this with T-Rex, I did this with Butters, but I'm not adding the Butters footage because fuck them, that's why. No, it's just because like I already have an hour of this to cut down, and don't really want to, and I don't think anyone wants to watch like an hour of F4E versus MiG-21 bis. Basically, the thing that T-Rex can do better is if he comes in and he merges at like Omega speed and like does like a really kind of like gentle turn, he might be able to sit on the outside of my turn radius in a way that I can't like really do anything. The F4E on paper has a better, higher sustained turn rate with maybe potentially a lower instantaneous turn rate, but a lot of people make the mistake of going to a chart and going, aha, I figured it out. This rate number is bigger, therefore it wins. If you actually believe that, I implore you to go look up any of the AirRB tournaments and look at every single major tournament and just come back and tell me how many has the F-14A won. And the answer is going to be 0. The F-14A, even though it has 26 degrees per second rate, like 5 degrees per second rate better than like everything else in the game, has never won any of the major mixed 1v1 tournaments. It's just not really as suited to dueling 1 versus 1 dogfights as people make it out to be, at least the flowchart gamers. And the same thing is with the MiG-21 bis versus the F4E matchup. I start these out with the idea that I'm going to go up a little bit more, and I probably mismanage kind of my angles a little bit. And T-Rex is actually pretty smart. He comes in, he's aggressive, and being aggressive means that you're willing to shed your speed for position to try to get a shot and trying to do it earlier on instead of playing for energy or playing for rate or anything like that. There is a balance between two different play styles. It's aggressive and passive. Typically, if you wanted to be really academic about it, you'd be like, well, aggressive is 1 circle and passive is 2 circle. But it's not really that, because you're switching between lead, lag, peer, all that crap, and you're switching between how much you pull and how much you don't. And it's different. It's not something that you understand until you experience it. It's not something you understand in sim until you experience it against like a good aggressive player, like a good passive player. It's hard to explain in a way that like actually makes sense without just feeling like spreading misinformation. Now, with all that being said, fuck you, I'm going to do it anyways. We're going to go one circle with the F4E Phantom right here. We're going to come around the lap, and we're going to be going around, and we're trying to build a specific excess power energy. No, I can't keep the hype up that much. But no, I am going to do videos like this because until someone better who's more articulate comes along and wants to explain things and not spread misinformation, I'm going to spread my own brand of misinformation. And my brand of misinformation right now is I think the F4E and MiG-21 BIS matchup seems to be fairly well balanced. I think between both of these planes, especially on min fuel, without the flare pods and just kind of guns only, it's kind of either one of these planes to lose. Like, I started against T-Rex, and I had this idea in my head that he's going to want to fight at high speed because the F4E has a better rate, and he's going to try to drain my speed with rate, so I'll come in, I'm going to try to like get a little bit higher so I can use gravity to kind of assist me. And it didn't work. It did not work because he's like, well, you're just going to go up in front of me. I'm just going to pull hard, use my wing slats, and just assume that I can aim better and that you're not going to do anything. It's a very good way to kind of call the bluff on and fight in a way that is counterintuitive. It's not something that you would immediately recognize. It's not something that most people would do right away. But it was something that was very effective. And it's probably something that's very effective in the context of air EC, because usually in EC, there are two kinds of people. Those that hold way too much speed and are afraid to lose any of it, and those that don't maintain any speed at all. And being good at shedding speed and doing it correctly is it's a pretty big skill that I try to teach people. I think it's something that makes a huge difference for the context of EC. Do the same thing. We come in and we go vertical, but instead of pulling a lot of lag, I transition to lead and I go to flaps, and I'm basically trying to force my position into a shot that he has to dodge. And once we go vertical here, we're in a scissors, he's reversed the turn, and if I can fight at low speed with these blown flaps, I can kind of get in behind him and sit behind him. And what I'm trying to do is maneuver my plane into a position that causes him to shed energy and causes him to be forced to fight at kind of like a speed range that he doesn't want to. What I don't want him to do is I don't want him to be able to relax his pull on his stick and then kind of gain speed and then sit in rate. Because if we sit like in symmetric circles for like a couple minutes at high speeds, he's eventually going to pull in behind me, he's going to win, or I'm going to be sitting inside of his circle, but I won't be able to actually get around, and then eventually he'll be able to go up. And if he's eventually able to go up and go up without flying in front of my guns, he's able to go up, come back down, and shoot me. I don't want that to happen. I want to kind of keep things nice and close, nice and tight, kind of like these scissors, because like in these counter attacks here, like when he goes up here, he's going to try to pull into me. I'm going slower than he is, and his plane's not quite as good at it as the MiG-21 is. With that being said, I might have spread a little bit of misinformation here, because if we look at this transition again, he's pretty close. He's going to go up over, and he's going to come down in front of us, but I think that from his position, he might have been able to delay that rollover and that pull back down a little bit more, where he went more vertical to come back down. That would have caused us to maybe like shoot out in front. That's one of those things though about dueling, is that it's not just my one circle, my two circle. A lot of it's like timing and spatial recognition, where he thought that he had the space to pull back into an attack, and it turns out I was going slower than he thought. And it's part of the learning process. Like, part of the learning process is learning to recognize space and actually look for attacks and go for them. And sometimes, like, you go for an attack or you try to build to a better attack. Okay, I'm going to skip kind of towards the end of the dueling session, and you can see that I've really leaned into a very aggressive playstyle with the MiG-21. I'm trying to be very threatening with the nose at the start, trying to basically shoot him in the first turn and kind of like force him out of the way and force him into a defensive position where he can't really do anything from. He's able to get out of the way of the guns in the first one. He's able to get out of the way of the guns here, and we both kind of like deny each other the ability to attack each other here. But I'm in a good position. If our planes were the same, if we had the same rate, this would be a really easy win. But because I have no speed, and I'm trying to regain speed. I'm trying to like pull in just a little bit here, trying to get kind of like a Hail Mary here so I don't have to sit in the rate at all. I'm not able to get it, and he's able to gain a little bit of speed back, but I'm canceling out his speed gains, canceling out the energy difference by going vertical, because then I can go vertical, I can come down, I can use gravity to kind of assist me, and that's kind of like the goal here. Doing this, doing it consistently, and doing it like in a way that makes sense that you can articulate, there's a point where it's not a skill and it becomes more of like a reflex, more of an art form, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. I'm going to try to go up, over, pull lead pursuit, try to drop down onto him here. And I realize I can't really do it unless we go mutual head-on. And I think, well, at the last second, I think, well, I'll go to the outside, and if I can get just beyond where he can point his nose, I'll gain speed and go up again, and then be able to come back down. But that's not the case. He's able to pull in, and I die. In reality, what I probably should have done is probably should have just, like, took the head-on, but going head-on with the Gussie versus the Vulcan is kind of like, it's kind of a loser point of view. So I tried to go for winner point of view, and it didn't really work for me. Same style of merge here, same first turn thing. And that's the thing with dueling, too, is when you practice against someone who's, like, basically near your skill level, a lot of these duels are going to start looking almost exactly the same. There's a lot of stuff that's very repetitive, where you're trying to not just find, like, reinvent the wheel, but trying to, like, polish the wheel so that you actually go around the circle a little bit quicker into, like, the right angle and all that, you know, all that funky, hunky-dory good stuff. But it's like, I can't teach that in a video. You have to go out and actually do the damn thing. And you also have to, like, do it against people of different experience levels, because there's a point where you get, like, just enough skill that you're like, you go duel some random in some random sim Discord, and 2 turns they've just flown in front of you. Like, you're not learning anything from that. You're just learning, like, wow, this guy's, like, completely clueless. That's why, like, my Discord has kind of became, like, the de facto place to maybe not learn sim dueling. I'll say learn, but I'll say more like learn through practice, learn through just kind of being bullied over and over by a bunch of different people until eventually you learn how to bully other people. But it's the same thing. We've kind of set up into a rate fight. He goes a little bit more vertical, and we're just trying to time things out here. Now, I think that for him to improve, for him to really easily win this, I think if he recognizes a point where he can escape to actually, like, giga high speed, then it might be over for me. Now, I'm baiting a vertical. I think I can get the shot here. I'm going to come in, and this is kind of like the same thing. It's the opposite end of the same spectrum of, like, he thought that he could pull in but stay outside the guns, but it's like, no, he was just barely there. Now that everyone is hopefully dying from alcohol poisoning from playing the Aero Turtle video drinking game, I do want to round out my video with some sort of a conclusion. And I think the first conclusion is, like, take videos like this with kind of a grain of salt. You can't make a conclusion about this matchup, even though me and T-Rex might be quote-unquote good. If we practice this more, I think we might come to a different conclusion. There are things that both me and him can do, even outside of, like, just basic trajectory stuff, that might just improve. For example, like the MiG-21, it has blown flaps. It means that it loses thrust, but gains lift because it diverts some of the engine power over the flaps. Using it in the vertical might be very important as far as the timing goes. If I keep the flaps in and go more vertical and then pop them out later, there might be some attacks that go from being, oh, it just barely misses, into being basically free wins. At the same time, if he just comes in and merges at giga speed, that might just be, like, unbeatable.